Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into a story today that might just make you rethink your whole retirement plan.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be talking about Bitcoin,
Okay.
but not in the way you might expect.
Okay.
This isn't about like day trading or, all the ways people think they can get rich quick with Bitcoin.
Gotcha.
This is about how a seemingly ordinary company
Hmm.
called MicroStrategy might be quietly like reshaping the financial landscape and
Interesting.
how your 401k could be caught in the crosshairs.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a bold statement.
I know, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy what's going on here.
I think it's a fascinating case study in how interconnected like the financial world really is,
Yeah.
and how even if you've never bought a single Bitcoin, like you said, you might be more exposed to it than you realize.
That's what's so crazy about this story.
Yeah.
It's like under the surface.
Right?
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is MicroStrategy?
Okay.
And what have they done that's got everyone buzzing?
So MicroStrategy, they're a business intelligence company.
Okay.
But they've made this bold move. Some might even say controversial move.
Okay.
They've decided to put a significant portion of their assets, we're talking billions of dollars, into Bitcoin.
So they're basically just going all in on Bitcoin.
Pretty much, yeah. They're really betting big on it.
Wow. Okay, so how does that impact like my 401k?
Right.
I mean, I don't remember like picking any Bitcoin stocks.
Yeah. And that's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Back on December 23rd, 2024, MicroStrategy was added to the NASDAQ Q100 index.
Oh, wow.
And this index is like a benchmark
Okay.
for the top 100 non-financial companies on the NASDAQ Key Stock Exchange.
Gotcha.
So think, Amazon, Tesla, like the big players.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of investment funds, including many 401k plans, are actually designed to track this index.
Oh, so they automatically buy shares of all the companies in the index,
Exactly.
including MicroStrategy.
Yep. So if your 401k is invested in one of these funds, you now own a tiny piece of MicroStrategy
Oh.
and by extension, a tiny piece of their Bitcoin holdings.
Whoa.
It's like this hidden connection that most people aren't even aware of.
So sneaky. Okay, that's starting to make sense, but help me understand the scale here.
Okay.
If the NASDAQ Q100 is, for these huge companies like Apple, how much influence does a company like MicroStrategy actually have?
Okay. That's where market capitalization comes in, or market cap for short.
Okay.
Basically, it's the total value of a company's outstanding shares.
Gotcha.
And the NASDAQ Q100 is weighted by market cap.
Okay.
So that means companies with larger market caps have a bigger impact on the index.
Makes sense.
So for example, Apple might represent like 8.85% of a NASDAQ Q100 index fund,
Okay.
while MicroStrategy is only around 0.47%.
Okay, so it's a small slice,
Yeah.
but it's still there.
It's still there. It's still a part of it.
Okay, and you're saying this is all tied to the rise of passive investing?
Precisely. Passive investing is all about tracking an index
Okay.
rather than, trying to pick individual stocks.
Right.
This approach was really popularized by Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, he championed these low-cost index funds as a way for everyday people to invest in the stock market.
That makes sense.
And guess what? Passive investing has exploded in popularity.
Really?
Yeah, it actually overtook active management in the U.S. in early 2024.
Wow, so we're talking billions of dollars
Billions, yeah.
flowing into these index funds,
Right.
which are then required to buy MicroStrategy stock.
Uh-huh.
And what happens next?
Well, MicroStrategy has made it clear.
Okay.
They're using this influx of cash to buy more Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
They're either buying it directly or issuing bonds to raise capital, which they then use to buy more Bitcoin.
It's like a Bitcoin buying spree.
It's pretty unconventional,
Yeah.
to say the least.
So they're basically using the stock market to fuel their Bitcoin buying.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that a bit risky?
It certainly is.
Yeah.
And it's created this really fascinating feedback loop
Oh,
that has some people cheering and others just scratching their heads.
I can imagine. All right, I'm intrigued, but my head is starting to spin a bit.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
Can we break down this feedback loop, like step by step?
Absolutely. So step one, money flows into these NASDAQ Q100 index funds,
Okay.
which then use that money to buy shares of all the companies in the index, including MicroStrategy.
All right, so we've got money flowing into these funds that track the NASDAQ Q100,
Right.
and they're scooping up shares of MicroStrategy as part of this whole passive investing trend.
Exactly. Yep. And that's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
This is where MicroStrategy comes in.
Okay.
They take all that money they've gotten from investors buying their stock,
Uh-huh.
and they use it to buy even more Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Oh, geez.
But the fire in this case is the price of Bitcoin.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So the more money that flows into these NASDAQ 100 funds,
Right.
the more MicroStrategy can buy Bitcoin. And I'm guessing that impacts the price of Bitcoin itself.
That's step 3.
Okay.
That's where we see the price of Bitcoin potentially going up.
Okay.
Now, of course, there are lots of factors that influence Bitcoin's price.
Sure.
But this constant buying pressure from MicroStrategy is definitely playing a role.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got the price of Bitcoin potentially going up.
Right.
Where does MicroStrategy's stock fit back into all of this?
Well, as the price of Bitcoin goes up,
Mhm.
the value of MicroStrategy's Bitcoin holdings also increases.
Okay.
That makes the company itself more valuable,
Right.
which then bumps up their stock price.
Got it.
This is step 4 of our feedback loop.
So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Kind of, yeah.
The more Bitcoin they buy, the higher their stock price goes,
Uh-huh.
which allows them to buy even more Bitcoin.
Exactly.
And that pushes the price up even further.
It's a cycle that feeds on itself.
Wow.
And step 5 brings us right back to the beginning. As MicroStrategy's stock price rises, their market cap goes up. And remember, the NASDAQ 100 is weighted by market cap.
Right.
So a higher market cap means a bigger slice of those passive investment funds are flowing right back into MicroStrategy.
So it's like a financial perpetual motion machine.
In a way. Yeah.
But I have to imagine not everyone is thrilled about this situation.
Oh, of course not.
It sounds pretty risky.
It definitely can be.
Yeah. Have there been any concerns raised about this whole MicroStrategy Bitcoin feedback loop?
Absolutely. There's been a lot of debate about this,
I bet.
especially online,
Yeah.
like in communities like Reddit.
Oh, yeah.
Some people are comparing this strategy to some of the risky financial instruments that led to the 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, no.
Yeah, things like collateralized debt
The
obligations.
CDOs.
Or CDOs, yeah.
I can see the comparison, bundling up risky
Yeah.
assets and just hoping for the best.
Exactly. But then you have Bitcoin proponents
Okay.
arguing that this situation is fundamentally different.
Okay. How? So
They point out that Bitcoin is a bearer asset.
what does that mean?
Essentially, whoever holds the private keys to a Bitcoin owns it.
Oh.
There's no central authority or intermediary involved.
So it's like a more direct form of ownership.
Precisely.
Okay. So unlike those CDOs, which were built on layers of complex financial engineering,
Right?
Bitcoin is more straightforward.
Yeah.
You either own the Bitcoin or you don't.
That's the argument they're making.
That makes sense.
Of course, we're not here to take sides.
Of course not.
But it's important to present both perspectives.
Yeah, for sure.
And let you draw your own conclusions.
Absolutely.
But adding another layer to this whole story,
Okay.
there's a recent change in accounting rules
Oh, yeah.
that we should probably unpack.
Yeah, didn't some accounting rules change at the end of December 2024?
You're right.
That impact how MicroStrategy can report their Bitcoin holdings?
Exactly.
Okay.
Before these changes,
Mm-hmm.
MicroStrategy could only report losses on their Bitcoin holdings.
Oh, really?
If the price of Bitcoin went down, they had to reflect that on their income statement.
Okay.
But if the price went up, they couldn't report those gains.
That seems kind of strange.
It is a little odd.
Yeah, why wouldn't they be able to report gains?
Well, accounting rules can be pretty complex,
I bet.
but essentially, Bitcoin was treated differently from other assets.
Oh, I see.
This new rule change now allows MicroStrategy and other companies to report price gains on their Bitcoin holdings.
Oh, so now when Bitcoin is doing well, their financial statements will look even better.
Precisely.
I see.
And this has some pretty big implications.
What kind of implications are we talking about?
Well, for starters, this rule change makes MicroStrategy look more attractive to traditional investors.
How so?
Well, their earnings now more accurately reflect the performance of their Bitcoin holdings.
Okay, that makes sense.
But this could also make the feedback loop even stronger.
Oh, how so?
If their earnings look better, their stock price could go even higher,
Right.
which allows them to buy more Bitcoin.
Wow. It just keeps going.
It does, but perhaps even more significant
Okay.
is that this accounting rule change could pave the way for MicroStrategy to be included in an even bigger index,
Oh, what's that?
the S&P 500.
Hold on. The S&P 500?
Yep,
That's like the gold standard of stock market indexes. Isn't that reserved for the biggest and most established companies in the U.S.?
It is, and that's why this is such a big deal.
Okay.
The S&P 500 is used as a benchmark for trillions of dollars of investment funds.
Trillions with a T.
Trillions with T, yeah.
Yeah.
If MicroStrategy gets added to that index,
Okay.
it could unlock a flood of passive investment flowing directly into the company.
And by extension, a flood of investment into Bitcoin.
Exactly.
It's mind-boggling to think about the potential scale of this.
It really is.
It's like MicroStrategy is becoming this backdoor
Yeah.
for Bitcoin to enter the mainstream financial system.
It's a fascinating development, and it really highlights how Bitcoin is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore,
Yeah.
even for the most traditional players in finance.
Yeah. It's like this quiet revolution happening right under our noses.
It really is.
But before we get too carried away with all the potential scenarios,
Okay.
let's take a step back and think about the big picture.
All right.
What does this all mean for the future of Bitcoin?
That's the question everyone is asking.
For sure.
And there are no easy answers.
Right.
But I think it's safe to say that this situation with MicroStrategy is a clear sign that Bitcoin is gaining legitimacy
Right.
in the eyes of major institutions.
It's no longer just a fringe asset
Right.
for tech enthusiasts and early adopters.
Exactly. We're seeing companies like Tesla holding Bitcoin on their balance sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And now MicroStrategy is pushing the boundaries even further.
Wow.
It's really making people rethink their assumptions about what money is and how it works.
It's like we're witnessing a clash of the titans.
Yeah.
Traditional finance versus the world of cryptocurrency.
Exactly.
And it's anyone's guess who will come out on top.
It's a fascinating time to be watching this all unfold.
It really is.
And as this story continues to develop, we'll be here to help you make sense of it all.
I appreciate that. Now, we've talked a lot about the mechanics of this feedback loop
Right.
and the potential implications for MicroStrategy and Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
But let's shift gears for a moment
Okay.
and think about what this means for our listener.
Okay.
The everyday person trying to navigate this complex financial landscape.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, this isn't just some abstract financial game.
Right.
It has real-world consequences
Yeah.
for people's lives and their financial well-being.
Absolutely.
And one of the biggest takeaways from this whole situation
Okay.
is that even if you're not actively investing in Bitcoin,
Uh-huh.
you might be exposed to it through your retirement savings, your investments, or even your bank.
It's like this hidden connection that most people aren't even aware of.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to stay informed
Yeah.
and understand the risks and potential rewards of this new financial landscape.
Knowledge is power.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to your money.
Couldn't agree more.
And as we delve deeper into this topic,
Right.
we'll explore some practical steps you can take to manage your exposure to Bitcoin
Right.
and navigate this evolving financial world.
All right, so we've uncovered this fascinating feedback loop with MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin and potentially pushing up its own stock price.
Yeah.
And we've talked about how this could have ripple effects throughout the entire financial system. But let's get down to like brass tacks. What are some potential scenarios that could play out here? What does the future hold for Bitcoin and for those who might be exposed to it, whether they realize it or not?
Predicting the future is always a bit of a gamble, but it's definitely helpful to explore different possibilities.
For sure.
So let's start with what I'll call the bull case scenario for Bitcoin.
Okay.
Imagine, major corporations like Apple or Microsoft starting to add Bitcoin to their balance sheets.
Okay.
Maybe even some governments decide to, dip their toes in the water.
So Bitcoin goes from being this kind of like niche asset to a mainstream investment.
Right. Held by some of the biggest players in the world.
What kind of impact could that have?
Well, in that scenario, we could see the price of Bitcoin absolutely skyrocketing. I'm talking potentially orders of magnitude higher than where it is today.
That's a bold prediction. I mean, wouldn't that create a massive bubble?
It's certainly a possibility, but remember, the underlying value proposition of Bitcoin is that it's a decentralized, scarce digital asset.
Right.
There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in existence.
Yeah, that's right.
So as demand increases and supply remains capped, it's not unreasonable to think that the price could continue to climb.
Okay, so let's say the price of Bitcoin does go up significantly. What are the broader implications for like the financial system as a whole?
Well, it would be a major disruption to the status quo. Bitcoin could potentially challenge the dominance of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency.
Wow, that's a big deal. I mean, the US dollar has been the king for decades.
Yeah, it really has.
How would governments and central banks react to something like that?
That's the big unknown. It's completely uncharted territory. Some governments might embrace Bitcoin and try to integrate it into their existing financial systems. Others might try to resist it or even outlaw it.
So it could create this whole new geopolitical landscape.
Absolutely. And it would raise some fundamental questions about, the role of money and power in the 21st century.
It's a fascinating thought experiment.
It really is.
Okay, so we've explored this optimistic scenario where Bitcoin kind of takes the world by storm.
Right.
But what about the other side of the coin?
Okay.
What happens if things go south?
Yeah, that's a possibility we can't ignore.
Right.
Let's call this the bear case.
Okay.
Imagine a scenario where there's a major security breach involving Bitcoin.
Okay.
Or maybe a powerful government cracks down on cryptocurrency.
Ah.
Or perhaps it's just a simple loss of confidence in the market.
Yeah.
Whatever the trigger, a significant drop in the price of Bitcoin could have cascading effects.
So we're talking about a potential crash, similar to like the dot-com bubble or the housing market collapse.
It's definitely a possibility.
And if a crash were to happen, it could wipe out a lot of wealth.
Absolutely. Not just for individual investors, but also for companies like MicroStrategy that have bet big on Bitcoin.
And if those companies start to fail, it could have ripple effects throughout the financial system, right?
Exactly.
Sure.
Especially if traditional financial institutions have become heavily exposed to Bitcoin or companies like MicroStrategy, it could create a domino effect that's difficult to contain.
Okay, so we've got these two extremes. Bitcoin as the future of money versus Bitcoin as a speculative bubble about to burst. Is there a middle ground here? What's the most likely scenario?
Well, as always, the truth probably lies somewhere in between.
Probably, yeah.
A more realistic scenario is that Bitcoin continues to evolve gradually. It gains more acceptance over time. But it also faces setbacks and periods of volatility. It's a bumpy ride, but the overall trend is upward.
So kind of like the early days of the internet.
That's a great analogy.
A lot of hype, some crashes along the way, but ultimately transformative in the long run.
Exactly. In this scenario, we see more and more companies finding ways to integrate Bitcoin into their operations. Maybe we even start to see it used for everyday transactions.
But it's not this overnight revolution. It's a gradual process of adoption and integration.
Exactly. And along the way, there will be winners and losers.
For sure.
Companies that adapt and innovate will thrive. Those that cling to the old ways might get left behind.
So what advice would you give to our listeners who are trying to make sense of all this and figure out how to navigate this new financial landscape?
The same advice applies regardless of which scenario plays out. Stay informed, do your research, and don't invest more than you can afford to lose.
It's like exploring any new and uncharted territory. Proceed with caution, but don't be afraid to learn and explore.
Exactly. Because whether you embrace it or not, Bitcoin and the world of cryptocurrency are here to stay.
Yeah.
And understanding this technology and its implications is essential for anyone who wants to be financially savvy in the 21st century.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into MicroStrategy, Bitcoin, and the future of finance.
Wow.
It's been a wild ride.
It certainly has. And I have a feeling this story is far from over.
You're probably right. So to our listeners out there, stay curious, keep learning, and remember to always dive deep.
Always dive deep.
We'll see you next time